The reform vote is the you vote. All I see Farage as is like a failure of the left. The left are not doing anything that's left-wing. Like Labour are not doing anything that's left-wing. In all these young lads' hearts is they just want to be loved and they just want to have a life where they work hard and they'll be rewarded for it. Reform have an answer. It's immigration. That's all it is. It's wrong, but they have an answer. I think I went to this one rally and it had him with like a muzzle in his mouth and it said something like silenced.
I wish he'd keep it on.
Yeah.
Hello and welcome to the Trawl Meets. I'm Jemma Forte.
And I'm Marina Purkis. And on the Trawl Meets, Jemma and I get to chat with someone we admire and find interesting. And we discuss political topics they're passionate about and explore their unique experience of and views of social media.
Now, a few months back, our friend Kate sent Marina and I a documentary called How I Escaped the Alt-Right Pipeline. And she wrote a note to Marina and I, and it said, really interesting guy. He basically opens up about how he's changed from being pretty far right to left. Now, this instantly interested us, particularly given the rise of reform in this country. They are scooping up young male voters left, right and centre. And we really want to understand why. And we understand a bit, but not enough, is my view. So we both watched the documentary and here we are.
Yeah, I was absolutely glued to it, by the way. So it's worth noting that our guest today has got 572,000 subscribers on YouTube, and the documentary that Jemma just mentioned has had a staggering 1.4 million views. That is an amount that any terrestrial TV channel would bite their arms off for. So here is a clip of him in action.
I remember I got one job and I met this geezer and he was a proper right-winger.
Capitalism is good because capitalism is freedom. Socialism is bad because socialism is tyranny.
It was like a right-winger in the flesh. I'd never seen one before. I was like, what the fuck hell is this? Capitalism good? Welfare state bad? NHS bad? But you see, although I deeply disagreed with all of his views at the beginning, you got to remember 13-year-old contrarian Jimmy. He's still in there somewhere. And what he's hearing is contrarian views, you say. Anti-establishment, non-mainstream. Little old hipster Jimmy lapped up this sort of right-wing rhetoric because I realised it was different to everyone else and that would make me interesting if I believed all these things, right? And like when I say right-wing, it's not, you know, we don't like foreigners. It's stuff like this.
The people who get on welfare lose their human independence and feeling of dignity. They become subject to the dictates and whims of their welfare supervisor who can tell them whether they can live here or there, whether they may put in a telephone, what they may do with their lives. They're treated like children.
So now I'm at the doors of the alt-right pipeline, right? I pick up my hat with the light, turn the torch on, grab my pickaxe, and I head in. And the first stop is Jordan Peterson.
Welcome, Jimmy the Giant, real name Kieran, but for purposes of this, we're going to call you Jimmy if that's all right. Hello.
For sure. Hello. Thanks for having me.
Cool. So let's start at the beginning. By the way, brilliant production quality on those clips. Yeah. Very impressive. So you mentioned in that clip being 13-year-old little Jimmy, and that's how old you were. It seems that you had your political awakening. Is that right?
Something like that. It was like back when, it would have been early YouTube era. So you were going from like just playing your video games, playing your RuneScape, and then you go onto YouTube to watch maybe like a tutorial how to do the game you're playing a bit better. And then you see like 9/11 was an inside job, and you're like, what's that? And then you click on that, and then you see Alex Jones, this crazy charismatic guy. You start listening to him, and you just wander down these little paths. And I think 9/11 for me was like the early one, because it was so like, I think I've talked about this a few times, and I think what it is it was a whole theory that opposed everything you were being told. But it was a formulated theory. It wasn't just an idea. It was like they have research, they have like different accounts, and it was like it felt really thorough and fleshed out. And it was like, oh my God, I've discovered this like secret. And it was like, I think that was appealing as a young person. It's very appealing.
And just thinking about it, I guess that coincides with an age group who are not going to sit there and pick up a newspaper.
Yeah.
You know? So suddenly you're getting this information and it seems really legit, all of it. Now, you've mentioned Alex Jones and you talk in the documentary about other people who are almost like a gateway to the right, if you like. And they tend to be contrarians who really caught your imagination. And one of them, I mean, he's world famous, Jordan Peterson. Now, I know, listeners, most of you will know all about Jordan Peterson, but for those of you who don't, let's have a little précis. So in The Guardian, for instance, they said Peterson is not just another troll or a narcissist or a blowhard whose arguments are fatally compromised by bad faith, petulance, intellectual laziness and blatant bigotry. It is hard to argue with someone who believes what he's saying and I think this is the point, knows what he's talking about, or at least conveys that impression. And I think that's very true indeed. You hear Jordan Peterson and there's no two ways about it. You know, he sounds like an intellectual. And then furthermore, it said, so somebody like far right-wing commentator like Melanie Phillips, for instance, for people like that, he's a kind of secular prophet in an era of lobotomized conformism. And he is therefore adored by figures on the so-called alt-light, basically the alt-right, but without the C Kyles. So quite interesting. So, yeah. Jordan Peterson.
Yeah, and another thing I heard, which I think is so bang on, not just for Jordan Peterson, but also some of our politicians, is he was described as the stupid man, smart person, which I think is a real problem that we have today, because we've talked about this before, but when people speak with that conviction and they can actually put across an argument that feels like, okay, fine, don't quite get that, but then they back it up with what feels like research or that's when it becomes like, okay. And then they start to get the attention of people like, you know, we've got a friend of ours whose dad has been a really clever guy, right?
Yeah.
Somewhat radicalised, starting with Jordan Peterson.
Yeah. True. So we've got a clip of Jordan Peterson in action, and this interview became infamous in the end in the UK. He was already very well known in Canada and other places. It was with Channel 4's Cathy Newman, and it's from 7 years ago.
I mean, that sounds pretty bad. You're saying
It's
there's a
bad.
crisis of masculinity? I mean, what do you do about it?
You help people understand why it's necessary and important for them to grow up and adopt responsibility, why that isn't a shake your finger and get your act together sort of thing, why it's more like a delineation of the kind of destiny that makes life worth living. I've been telling young men, but it's not, I wasn't specifically aiming this message at young men to begin with. It just kind of turned out that way.
And it's mostly, you admit, it's mostly men listening. I mean,
It is.
90% of your audiences are men,
Well, it's
right?
about 80% on YouTube, which is YouTube is a male domain primarily. So it's hard to tell how much of it is because YouTube is male and how much of it is because of what I'm saying. But what I've been telling young men is that there's an actual reason why they need to grow up, which is that they have something to offer, you know, that people have within them this capacity to set the world straight, and that's necessary to manifest in the world. And that also doing so is where you find the meaning that sustains you in life.
So what's gone wrong then?
Oh, God, all sorts of things have gone wrong. I don't think that young men hear words of encouragement. Some of them never in their entire lives, as far as I can tell. That's what they tell me. And the fact that the words that I've been speaking, the YouTube lectures that I've done and put online, for example, have had such a dramatic impact is an indication that young men are starving for this sort of message, because, like, why in the world would they have to derive it from a lecture on YouTube?
So, interesting. We're starting to get to the heart of things already. He's literally saying, I hear you, I see you. I guess that's part of the appeal.
Yeah, it's so like I'm curious to hear your opinion just on that clip alone. What do you take from that? Do you find anything crazy, or you're like, it's kind of a nice message?
I feel like if I was feeling a bit disenfranchised and I didn't have a male role model in the home, I would feel like, yeah, he speaks for me. I totally would be attracted towards it. I've actually been in a studio with Jordan Peterson years ago on The Right Stuff, and I remember thinking then, this was before I became radicalised and politicised, I remember thinking, you know, he is a very intelligent man, and that some of what he said was very, very interesting. And some of what he said at the time, I can't remember what it was he was on to talk about, sort of went over my head a bit. And I think it's dangerous to say, the stupid person, smart person. I think that's a bit sneery, because I think you can be very bright and find him interesting.
The thing about this is where I've kind of landed, and I guess it's from learning a bit more about, I guess, capitalism and stuff, is like Jordan Peterson and all the self-help people, they exist in the framework of what people like refer to as like capitalist realism, which is like, the belief that the way that our society, the dog-eat-dog sort of competitive, hyper-competitive world that we live in, the belief that is, they sell it like that is just fundamental human nature. And so obviously that's where I deeply disagree. But in the framework, in the world we live in, it is like that. We are incredibly dog-eat-dog, and life will not give you anything for free. It's like, it's tough. Within that world, self-help messages like pick yourself up by the bootstraps, no one's going to give a fuck about you, you need to become a man. It's true in that framework. Like literally, you do need to do those things. And so that message when you're young and like you haven't learned about all these structures and why it's like this, and actually there might be alternatives to this, within that premise, and a young person's looking at their life and like looking ahead and they're like, well, I can see what the average salary is. I can see how many years of uni I'm going to have to do. I can see how expensive a house is. I have no fucking choice but to buy into that. That if I work really hard, I can make something of myself. And it's like, it's this sad thing of literally he is right within the framework of the world we're in currently. And obviously our argument is that framework is fucked and it shouldn't be like that.
I agree, by the way. The framework is fucked, and I really feel for the younger generations. What I struggle with a bit, or maybe not, but I want to ask you this question. Why is it mostly men and young men?
That's where I think it was manipulative. And so that's where I think when we were younger as young guys, we didn't see why that could be considered a little bit like maybe misogynistic or something like that, just from the frame of women have the exact same thing.
Problems,
yeah. But I think when you're a young lad and he's telling you it's like, it's you, or it's like, you know, he's looking at he'll show certain data that might show, I don't know, women might get better education results, but then he maybe be a bit quiet about the data about, I don't know, when women start asking for more money, they're more likely to be penalised by asking for more money, when men are more likely to be rewarded for it. He'll be quiet about that side of data, and he'll be like, look, women are, you know, feminism's done a very good job so far, and actually now it seems like women are actually doing better, but it's like really misrepresenting the data. So because maybe as a young person, you're really like, you just focus on your life and what you're seeing, and you're seeing that you have it fucked, all your mates have it fucked, and then he's sort of manipulating some data to show that women actually have it a little bit better, then it's like, okay, yeah, maybe it is this sort of man thing.
Yeah. What is really interesting is side by side, the male experience perhaps getting worse because of the environment that we all live in the system. Yeah. You've got feminism, which has been progressing, and we're still not equal in terms of pay and so on. But we've gone past that wave of ladette, which is when I was young, where women were like, okay, right, we can't beat you, we're going to be you. We're going to down pints and we're going to shag loads of men and we're going to talk about it and we're going to like be quite male, if you like, alpha. And then that's changed and it's like, no, you don't have to do that because you actually don't like beer. And
cocktails are so much fun.
Yeah, it makes you feel a bit gassy. So actually now you can be like much more yourself, but also own it. And what you have got is a plethora of strong female voices out there. We really do have plenty. Very positive role models. Women have grown in confidence in terms of going, actually, I don't need you, so I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. And I think that women outsource a lot of their therapy to their mates in a way, and I speak as a parent of a boy and a girl, that a lot of lads, not all, don't have that with their friendship circle.
Yeah, big time.
When they're hanging out, they're sitting next to each other watching sport.
Yeah,
and they're sort of communing.
There's a really good clip actually from Jane Fonda. Yeah, and she talks about how when women get together, they actually they look at each other, they face each other, they talk to each other. And yet when men get together, they're you're looking away, you're looking at sport, you're looking at women, you're looking at, exactly.
Play games, play on the whatever it is.
And in fact, you can, especially my husband Ben, it'd be like, how are they? How is so and so? What are they up to? How are the kids? Don't know. What did you talk about?
Yeah.
It's so true.
Yeah. So then when you've got someone who within his messaging sounds a little bit touchy-feely, like I get you. I think the old heartstrings as well of like, he understands. I don't know, maybe there's something in
definitely. Like young lads don't have I don't know. This is where I need to do a lot more research about how much is biology and how much is culture, and I think it must overlap heavily. But yeah, definitely young lads like to do a thing. They like to do sport together, but they don't talk together, and we're all painfully aware of it. And like, I remember I was talking to my missus, I was talking to her about when I was younger. you were kind of the one emotion. I've heard other people say this, and it's like the one emotion you're allowed to feel as a young lad is anger.
Mm-hmm.
You're not allowed to cry, and you're not allowed to feel sad and be like, you're not even allowed to feel a bit pathetic. Like sometimes we are just pathetic. Like sometimes like life gets too much. Yeah. Your life gets too much, and you just want to hug your wife or your partner or whatever.
And have a cry.
Yeah. And we're not allowed to feel that, and like society will insult us for that.
Yeah.
Society will even insult us for like. I remember being called gay for liking a girl. Like society will, when you're a kid, being a guy,
which isn't even a pejorative.
Yeah. Well, it's insane that doesn't logically.
It used to be back in the day.
But just the logic of that expression doesn't make sense. So it's like gay would have meant that you showed any sign of feelings.
Yeah.
It was like this word just
any feminine energy, perhaps.
Don't you think the most almost like crazy gaslighty smokescreen of all is that women are packaged up as being emotional, but the one emotion that men are allowed to have is anger.
Anger, it's all
which
we're
is
allowed.
massively
And
emotional.
we're rewarded for it.
It's exhausting.
It's exhausting, and we're rewarded for it. So like, say in school, I don't know, I remember literally if like you and your mate were hanging out too much, you get called gay. And so that just tells a young lad that you're being rejected from the group. But I remember if I get in a fight and I win that fight, I'm the coolest kid in the playground for like at least a week.
Yeah.
And it was like, that has a massive impact when you grow up. You're like, the only emotion that I'm allowed to express is anger.
Yeah.
And I think like, and so we do like, Jordan Peterson, he talks in this emotive way. So that's why a lot of people that follow him are like, he's not far right, he's not alt-right or whatever, because he's emotional and shit. And he cries all the time. It is this interesting dichotomy of like,
But then how do you square that with Andrew Tate, who has not got that emotional side to him? Well, he is emotional.
Very shouty.
Very shouty, very angry.
Very premenstrual.
I don't want to even describe him as alpha male because he is
premenstrual.
Yeah.
Because that is not an alpha male. That is such, in my eyes, he's a very broken, weak, tragic person.
100%.
And
Yeah,
yet
it's
something is
pathetic.
happening where he is also being regarded as this kind of, I don't know, is it a show of strength?
But it's like, this is that thing of within the world that we live in, he is, and the culture and the way that capitalism works is he is rewarded. By being so deeply ruthless, society has rewarded him. He's made a load of money. And that is the system we live in, is that...
Patriarchy.
Yeah, and it's just capitalism as well. It's like, it's just the fact that you get a financial reward, you get all the things, you get the woman, you get the car, you get all the things that society tells you is important. You get that by being the worst possible type of person. It's like, it's so fun. Yeah, and so he is like within the framework that this is like that sort of neoliberal attitude, that sort of Thatcher...
Trump.
But like that Thatcher attitude of there's no alternative. Capitalism is everything, and he won. And so young lads are looking at him, and they're like, well, he's got money, he's got all the things that I'm told I should have to be happy. And in that world, where really, I think really, really deeply in all these young lads' hearts is they just want to be loved, and they just want to have a life where they work hard and they'll be rewarded for it, and maybe they get a house, and maybe they can have a family, and maybe they can have kids. That's all. At the end of the day, I really think our needs are so little, but in a society where that is fucking stripped from us, like the idea of having a house is like insane for most average people. And so then you're just like in this world where you're hopeless, and then someone like him is like this ruthless character, and that's the world that we're being told to adapt to. So it's almost logical in a sense. Like there's almost some logic to it in a fucked up way.
And then you don't know how to relate to women. And then in the FT, there's a big piece the other day, and it said women leaving men behind. I think it was the first time in the UK that women's earnings were outstripping men's for the first time ever in history. And that was without adjusting for having babies and time off for maternity. But then there was quite a few people who took umbrage with saying, women sort of, what was it saying, leaving behind.
Why are you putting this on women, basically?
It sounded almost like a negativity, like we were just leaving you behind. It's like, no, they're just whatever, doing really, really well. And we've got to help the men find their way forward in this new environment.
Well, I'm really curious, what does it accredit those things? I think women are very, I don't know what it is, they're very good at they're very good at studying and very good at actually listening.
Yeah.
I wonder what it is.
They're very tough and very resilient as well. And I think also are looking around going, back in the day, someone more of my mum's generation and before would think that actually there was a lot of status in being married, and then there was more of a choice about far more people stayed at home because you could survive on one wage. So it made more sense and it was more traditionally the woman.
Yeah, I would even go back to like that. Even happened with me when in my relationship prior to being married. I had, and this was a long time ago, over 10 years ago. I had a lot of learning and growing up to do. I had sort of thought he was very wealthy, and I just thought, okay, I'm going to be the stay-at-home. I'm going to be the mum.
How did that go for you?
Didn't work out.
Busy person I've ever
It didn't
met.
work out, believe it or not. But when that relationship came crashing down, and it was all of a sudden, okay, it's just me, myself, and I had to step up, and there was no choice. And actually, I realised that it's much more. I feel much more secure being. Yes, I'm in a marriage now, and it's all very even, but being financially stable and independent.
Yeah. And I think now you can't really be just one salary for starters. And so therefore
And the
women
safety
are
net
really
is-
investing in their careers. Women are having babies later. They're perhaps not settling in the way that they did in terms of, well, if I don't have kids or if I don't, I'm still a sort of useful member of society. That old bullshit about being a spinster or whatever is just absolute crap.
Yeah.
And then sort of men are a bit like, oh, well, hello. Well, then hang on a minute. If she's actually earning more than me, and so where does that leave me? And, it's a lot. And somebody needs to step in and help everybody.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of it is stability, and people the reason you get married, I guess, is because you want stability. You want something to feel like, okay, in the worst scenario, I've at least got my
I can
partner.
rely
and
on
they're
my
always
partner,
going to be. And I think it's a big thing. And I think because again, I'm very much a lefty, where I always think about how capitalism plays into that, and it's like otherwise you are fucked. The safety nets are getting destroyed.
Yeah.
And if you have no money, you are fucked in this country.
Yes, you are.
Yeah, and I think that's a
it's
massive
also
part.
it's not fun.
Yeah,
Because
and
actually, they say money can't buy happiness, whatever.
It helps.
100% it
Going
can.
to the
There's literally
cinema is
data.
really lovely. Just being able to afford a bit of popcorn, or a lot of the things that I enjoy
There's
doing.
literally data that says money buys
I
happiness.
do like fresh air.
Money buys stability in relationships. More divorces happen at a certain earnings. Money 100% buys happiness.
I agree.
It's I think it's a myth to say it doesn't.
And as a mother
'Cause it's
who's got a
stability.
20-year-old daughter and an 18-year-old son, I have messaged them throughout their growing up. I've always said, look, guys, I really hope you find lovely partners whenever that is. And I really believe in love. And I can't wait to meet your future partners, whoever they may be. But always make sure you can look after yourself. And maybe I said that because I've divorced, whatever. But I'm like, do not meet someone and think that they're going to pay for everything.
Yeah, look,
Can't see your daughter being a trad wife.
No, I
think you're
can't
right.
either. Also, you just don't know what's around the corner.
I know. Jimmy, you did mention there you were a lefty now, but obviously you weren't always. So how did you go from admiring Jordan Peterson to thinking Tommy Robinson was a good idea?
Yeah. So I talked about this somewhere about what the right are very good at marketing stuff, and the thing that pulled me in. So if you think Jordan Peterson's big blow up was over free speech, and free speech just in and of itself is a sound principle. It's a great ideal that we as, I guess, Westerners aspire to achieve. So his whole argument and the way he positioned his argument was specifically it was over the trans legislation that was being passed in Canada about not being able to, if you misgender someone, it could be considered like a hate offence or something to that extent. And there's much more to it than Jordan Peterson made it out to be. And so Jordan Peterson just said, this is an attack on free speech. If a trans person tells me their pronouns, I'll refer to them as that. I have no prejudice against the trans person. And you're like, yeah, this is a sound it's like a principled argument. It's not even about the cause. And so you get on this kind of free speech thing, and you're seeing this as an attack on free speech because of the way he's positioning it. And then you see, so what happened with Tommy Robinson was the exact same thing, where it was coming across that his free speech to talk about grooming gangs was being suppressed. And so you go from, if you come from where I was, which was, I grew up very multiculturally, so I didn't really have any inbuilt prejudice that I was aware of. I didn't know a lot of Muslims, so I do think that helped into picking into that kind of part. But it was a principled free speech thing. The whole rally that I think I went to this one rally, and it had him with a muzzle in his mouth, and it said something like silenced.
I wish he'd keep it on.
Yeah. Yeah. I wish. Yeah. But so the whole thing was framed as a free speech principled thing. And then there's this thing, they call it the Galileo's Gambit, where it's if they're suppressing the truth teller, he must be telling the truth. And it's this thing of Galileo obviously thought the world was, you know, what's the word? Circle.
Yes.
The 3D.
Round.
Yeah. And he said that, everyone laughed at him, blah, 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 blah. But he was right. And the reason that story is interesting is because it happened maybe twice in history. But the Galileo's gambit is to sort of overly put stock into the potential that the person who's saying the counter-narrative is actually the genius. But all of them are saying the counter-narrative, and they can't all be correct. They can't all be geniuses. But he was doing it around, like, Islam. So you come in from free speech, and then you go, well, why are they suppressing it? You ask, like, why specifically this? And then he's saying, well, look, there's all these grooming gangs happening, and they weren't being arrested because they were scared of being called racist. And there's actually this problem within a very, very specific Pakistani cultural blah, 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 blah. And it seems so specific that it doesn't seem like, oh, we hate brown people, oh, we hate black people. So the more specificity, the more it feels like an intellectual thing, if you know what I mean. It's not just a general prejudice. It's like there is a case that is happening that's being suppressed. And then you start falling into that rabbit hole. I never got like super anti-Islam, but I sort of like thought, Islam seems to have some problematic elements. And then, from there, I kind of went into that and then came back out of it. Because I think when I saw kind of like, there was a riot at the one I went to, and I just kind of got the vibe that maybe this is a bit fucked.
So I think we've got some understanding now of how you went right. But I'm really interested to understand the moment you realised, perhaps I've been a bit hoodwinked with some of this. Perhaps my beliefs that are so entrenched are on shaky ground. Was it a sudden thing or was it gradual?
Gradual. And I always refer to it as like a Jenga tower, where like you've got this construction of ideas that very loosely hold themselves together. But as you start pulling out the pieces, it kind of like crumbles. And I think like one of the first ones was the Ukraine war, meeting a Ukrainian. And it's always funny because people always like, oh, you got married and you became a leftie. She was like a massive leftie. She was born in Ukraine. Like Ukraine is like a wildly capitalistic country and wildly conservative. Like they've come back, they made some progress, they're making some progress, but they are way more conservative. But what I was seeing was like what the right were talking about. All the right were talking about Ukraine was just insane. Like there was a guy called Tim Pool. There was a big clip of him sort of saying like Ukraine is the enemy, blah blah blah. And they always talk about Zelensky as a dictator and shit like this. And I was like, I mean, Putin has invaded this country and they're killing them daily. They didn't provoke it. It was like, and I was learning about it in the more because I was like now curious because I'd been sold this thing and I'm seeing something different. And so I'm being sold it and I'm talking to Ukrainians in Ukraine and hearing their take and hearing how they're talking about like Russians have definitely been like brainwashed. It's very like clear. Or it's that thing of they're just being quiet they're being scared to like say something. And it's very clear that that's going on. And then so I started to look more deeply into the Ukraine thing. And then I was like, how does anyone look at this and really say that like, you know, Ukraine are the bad guys or something? So it was that started it. And then from there, there was also, so that actually, no, that would have been a bit later. I'd made the video on chavs where I talked about Owen Jones and his work on chavs. And he talked about the kind of material elements, the sort of like, why chav culture was kind of a bit nihilistic or something, why it was a bit negative. But how that was as a result of policies and living conditions as opposed to decisions and cultural choices or something like that. Yeah.
Sometimes though, I feel like the counter argument is sometimes, like you say, hidden. It's too complex, long, convoluted, and it requires people to think beyond what's immediately presented to them. There's nuance to it. And I feel like we're in a period now where we are so, as a society, like impatient with regards to like our information, that we just want short, sharp, quick. What's the Occam's razor? I want the whatever is the first solution that's presented to me, that must be the right one, especially if it helps your narrative or helps you feel better about your understanding of the world.
I think that's a fair point in general, but I think you got to give some people credit. They were listening to hours and hours of Jordan Peterson, and like they were listening to long thought out things. So I think there's like a critical mass point where what you're saying is true for the general populace. But I think to get to that point, I think you need to like basically radicalize a few, like a sort of core, quite intellectual core that are like willing to put the time in to learn all this stuff. And then when that gets out, then it like, I remember having conversations where some would say about the gender pay gap, and I'd be like, wow, it's because women are more agreeable. And then you say that, and then they hear it a few times, and they go, oh, maybe I'm a bit wrong about that. Yeah. So I think you've got to give people credit. There are people.
I think this whole thing of like people are stupid is like really off the mark. Because, like, look how popular Owen Jones is on the left. And again, he's a guy, and they're watching hours of him on YouTube. They're watching hours of Jordan Peterson. And they're all clever speakers. It's just, as you say, the prevalence of the right. And they're much more tapped into
The left weren't ready
YouTube
for it.
and TikTok and whatever is coming next. They seem to be there first. And I don't know what it is about
The left weren't ready for it, and they also took the dumb principled position of like not engaging with these people because they were coming from the comfortable position that the left had sort of a lot of big ideas that were left-wing ideas were kind of mainstream, and they got too comfortable. And so when these people were coming along, they were like scared to have conversations with them.
Yeah.
And I understand it from like the idea of platforming, but they won anyway. So it's like, and they could have nipped it in the bud, or they could have put some pushback early. But now these ideas they become these folk myths and stuff.
Yeah.
And so now, that's where later in, and like this is where we're at now. And this is why I'm optimistic, because there are more people who are putting strong pushbacks to this stuff now.
Yeah.
It's like, Destiny when it comes to like MAGA and all that, but then you got like Dean Withers and who's the other
Dean Withers is brilliant,
He's great,
by the
isn't
way.
he?
We need to include him in some of our trawls. He's this young guy, isn't he?
Yeah.
And he basically goes up against MAGA. Like people his own age, students and above, and he is so brilliant in dismantling arguments.
He's good that he breaks the stereotype as well, because he kind of looks like a young, long-haired liberal, but he's jacked. I don't know if you've seen. He's like actually in mad shape. So it's like it's nice that he breaks that stereotype. So he's doing well. Luke Beasley's another American guy is doing well. And then it's stuff like this is where me and like people like Justin Giza and like who are some of the other guys. Unlearning Economics, where we're coming out with these sort of like big think pieces on these topics. So I'll talk about migration and I'll make a long video. And so I think we're in a good moment where we're now building up the counter argument. They were winning and they were chatting a lot of shit, so they left us a lot of ammunition, and now we're building the counter argument.
Okay, so this chat feels particularly pertinent at the moment because we are seeing how the right and indeed the far right are gaining momentum politically all over Europe, definitely in America, and Reform are making significant gains in the UK. This clip was from the beginning of February, and it's Sophie Ridge on Sky.
Don't pay too much attention to just one poll, but it's a pretty eye-catching one, and it's also part of a wider trend. Our deputy political editor, Sam Coates, has the details. What's going on?
So, the opinion poll that we've got is one that's absolutely guaranteed to drive the conversation. Small changes underlie it, but that doesn't mean it won't be big news. Let me take you through the latest YouGov Sky News exclusive poll, because what it does, Sophie, is it puts Reform UK in the lead. Only by a little bit and only after a small change, but Reform UK in the latest voting intention poll are on 25%, overtaking Labour, who were top, who are on 24%. The Tories down in third on 21%. Liberal Democrats on 14 and Green on 9.
If you had to bet, right, time of record, obviously we're years away from an election. What do you think? What are the chances? What would the odds be at the bookies on Farage being PM? Because I feel like potentially
Can I just jump in to offer some hope?
Yeah.
Right, there was a YouGov poll, because Jemma said to me she'd put a bet on it. Right, you would put a bet on Farage being the next Prime Minister.
Yeah.
And actually, there was a YouGov poll. Now I know there's a long way to go, but the YouGov poll had people saying that actually Keir Starmer is a better leader than any of the other options, including Nigel Farage.
Okay, good.
Now we aren't massive Starmer fans here, but I'm happy to see that he's still. I think it was about 10 percentage points or round about above Nigel Farage.
Yeah.
Whether that holds or not, don't know.
I think. Personally, right in this second, I think Farage deserves it, because if the left and the Labour Party aren't willing to do anything, then they deserve it. Like Farage is doing all the right things.
Yeah.
It's literally all I see Farage as is like a failure of the left. The left are not doing anything that's left wing. Like Labour are not doing anything that's left wing. They're not trying to like tax the rich more. They're not trying to like mass build. They're not trying to actually like level the playing fields, put more funding into like benefit system, unemployment benefits, disability benefit. They're not trying to pump the state. They're not trying to do mass investments. They're actually like smart. They're just kind of like lukewarm attempts at everything. Yeah. And if they don't do anything strong and bold and move the like narrative onto what I would say is like the key problem, like being inequality. If he doesn't do anything like that, it's just like the idea of like economic growth. That's all they talk about, and it's like we've talked about that forever, and it's not worked. Like it hasn't worked. It hasn't this.
Yeah.
Trickle down
Also,
thing doesn't work.
GDP is such a load of bollocks.
Yes.
Yeah.
GDP is like you can have moments in time or periods in history where GDP is through the friggin' roof and the stock market is absolutely flying and people don't feel it. So it doesn't matter. GDP is not a reflection of how most people feel, which is bollocks.
I know.
And another thing is that we're not, Labour especially. Do you remember when we couldn't believe one of the first things they did as well was to increase the student loan payments? Right. And we just thought, my goodness, you've got such a disenfranchised younger people. No wonder we're starting to see them become even more attracted by the likes of reform.
The reform vote is the fuck you vote. It's like the establishment has failed everyone. My whole generation have been literally robbed of the opportunity to have like the basics of life.
Yeah.
And when you're young and maybe you're working a job or you're busy or you're just uninformed or whatever, you hear something that is anti-establishment, something that cuts against what we've lived through. We've had 14 years of austerity and our lives, like we've seen it in our lives, our generation. And so you've got a party that's coming along, riding this whole populist wave that feels like a revolution, feels like something is changing, it feels like some anti-establishment thing. And you're like, yeah, fuck it. The other two aren't doing anything. And so that's where it's getting them. So I try not to like, I will often criticise any big voice, like someone with a platform who speaks these ideas, but the individuals, I don't criticise them at all. I think all they're trying to do is find some hope, and that's the only thing that's offering them something. And it's terribly thought out. It will never work. It's completely set to fail, and it will give more power to the billionaires. But it's the only thing that's anti-establishment. And Labour are just literally more of the same. Like you were saying about like GDP and how GDP is like kind of a pointless metric in some regards. And it is true, but to Labour and these parties that are like just fueled and funded by billionaires, to them it's not a pointless metric because to them that means the billionaires are doing very well.
Yeah.
Their donors are doing very well. All those people are doing very well if the GDP is going up.
I mean,
but you'll see it like, but it doesn't translate into like living standards. It's like you can look at like Ireland where the GDP per capita is going like this, but Irish people can't afford to buy houses. They're leaving Ireland. Like it doesn't map on.
Yeah.
But that's it. Yeah, we're operating through such a low resolution view. Like it should be happiness index. It should be stuff like, can people afford homes? How many people are able to have families and stuff like that? It shouldn't be how wealthy are the billionaires. That means how good we're doing.
Oh, I mean, I couldn't agree more. I am going to say Labour are pretty hamstrung by the country's finances. Like there's literally 2 trillion debt or whatever, so that it is an issue because you can't rock the markets by doing anything too crazy. Look what,
but that's exactly what Farage is promising. He's promising to rock the markets.
I know that, but I suppose I'm trying to offer a little bit of Labour balance. But we always go back to tax the wealthy. You do get some money in, and you give it to the right people.
So imagine this: if you're Keir Starmer right now. Right, if you just because Nigel Farage is basically saying I'm going to lift the threshold on income tax. That would absolutely
help everybody.
Yeah, help everybody, but also probably spook the shit out of the markets. Yeah. But actually, people don't care. People don't care. Yeah. Bob in Bolton doesn't care about the bloody markets. He just cares about hello. That means I'm going to have more take home.
Yeah.
That's it. But Labour are like the boring centrists who don't have a vision. So you can sell someone like an idea. You need to get a whole country behind an idea for it to work. And if probably even if Labour did the things that people like myself would like to see happen, like tax the wealthy much more, it probably wouldn't work because they haven't sold a dream or a vision to the people of the country. They're just like this like absolute boring like lukewarm party that don't stand for anything. And so like you need to like build this message. Like he needs to analyze, he needs to state what the problem is, and it's inequality. Like he needs to say that, and then we can start thinking of actual clever ways of solving it. Like there is arguments against taxing the wealthy. If you do it badly, you can cause capital flight. You can do it badly, but there are solutions to that. And there are like ways of doing taxes correctly that redistribute the wealth and like allow it so people have good living standards. It can be done, but we're not even near that because the message and the analysis of what is the problem, Labour and Conservatives don't tell you that there's a problem. It's just stuff, it's just we're struggling, we're stagnating, whatever. reform have an answer. It's immigration. That's all it is. It's wrong, but they have an answer.
Yeah, I think there's another thing to be said, that I think that people on the left are sometimes scared to state the bleeding obvious as well, and that there is nuance and there's always a grain of truth. Like, you can't have unchecked borders. You can't let every single sod in. You can't. And you need to know who's here. Like, that's valid. And the people are sort of worried about saying that. And I go, oh, like, does that make me sound like unsympathetic to refugees? No, that is obviously common sense as well. So it's like people end up saying nothing very sensible.
Yeah.
It's very frustrating. And actually, you know, I remember reading recently about, I can't remember which Scandi country, but they decided to do this scheme where a uni student, in order to save money, they could get free accommodation if they moved in with an elderly person, right? So they lived for free. And apparently it was brilliant.
That's the thing.
Because
Like,
the elderly people were lonely. They were going, oh, hello, come in and let's have tea together.
Yeah.
They were quite like chatting to the old bid, and they were
That's
having a
so
nice
nice.
time with them. And then they go out with their mates, and apparently it bloody worked for everybody.
Social cohesion.
Yeah, like a bit of community, and they were all doing it, and it was really, really successful.
And it keeps those two ends of the spectrum in touch.
Yeah.
Like the older
Yes.
generation, the young generation need to speak because then they can see each other, and that will affect how voting works. They'll start thinking, if we vote like this, it will probably
Yeah.
affect the youngers. Like,
And they were happier because they had more money, and they were happier because they had company, and then they both
That's
got
what-
things out of the relationship. We never hear any
that's
policy
what's so
like
annoying.
that.
Is like, I'm not like a political policy guy, but I listen to some people who are like heavy about policy. There's a guy who I think he worked for Bernie Sanders and he proposed some stuff. And there are actual smart people who have these awesome policy ideas, and unfortunately we're not even in the realm that we can even think about this. But there are smart solutions to this stuff. Like what you're saying is a great solution. But yeah, we don't like.
And you just get someone go, growth.
Yeah.
Growth. And I
the pie.
switch off when I hear growth.
Yeah,
I think,
growth is-
shut up. It
I
doesn't
don't want
mean
any.
anything.
I don't want that to be our objective. Growth's
Yeah.
great, but growth for growth's sake, as they all say,
Billionaires
is
are like
cancer.
buying 900 freaking
Yeah.
houses, and it's like,
Yeah.
they're growing. It's
Yeah,
just
exactly.
so
That's the thing. That's
triggering.
what Gary's economics. I think you guys spoke to him.
Yeah,
Yeah, he
we
said
had
to
them
say
on.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's like more and more growth. If it doesn't get redistributed, goes to the wealthy, and what do they do with that excess money? They buy up everything that we need, and it's like it's bang on the money. Like growth for growth's sake doesn't matter. It doesn't benefit anyone. Well, it does 1%.
It feels like we're penalised on every level. Every
Yes,
single
yeah.
bill's gone up. My mortgage has gone up, and I'm okay. So I keep going, oh, it's all right. Oh, it's
yeah.
okay. Oh, that's gone up too. Oh, okay. Oh, I went at 24 miles per hour, and I'm getting 3 points and a fine. Oh,
I had that
okay.
the other day.
That seems proportionate. Like that's
Yeah.
the same. I should
I
get
spent
1
2
point, you frickin' bellends. Like it's not the same as going at 88. So I should get punished, but not the same. And then I heard, oh, they're getting rid of sole occupancy discount on your council tax. So I've been spending 2/3 of my council tax because it's just me. My imaginary partner over there isn't contributing anything because I don't have
Jemma,
one.
do you know what you're missing?
What?
A lobbying effort. You need some lobbying money, resource,
Oh, yes.
team, and then
Okay.
you can do exactly what the ultra rich did when
I'll
they
take the
lobbied.
85p
when they
that
lobbied
easy.
Labour.
Pull yourself up by the bootstrap.
And then, they go with the younger generation, too many avocado on toast and Netflix.
Yeah,
and to
yeah.
me, I should be putting money into a pension, but I don't. I choose to get my hair dyed instead. Because life is short, Jimmy. And
Yeah.
I'm like, I could have some security in the future or lovely hair.
This is what I was talking to someone. Yeah, lovely hair is banging.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's making me happy right now.
Yeah, but that's why. So people, I think there's a phenomenon in sociology where people will look to the future and look to like making good long-term decisions if it seems proportionate to the effort.
Yeah.
So if it's something like, I don't know, in a year I can only save £1,000.
Yes.
And then I think, well, a deposit on a house is what, 80,000. So when I'm 80, I can get a deposit on a house.
I have this
It's like-
conversation
Yeah.
with my mum and dad all the time.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
they're boomers and they don't get it. They're like, yes, Marina, but you go out all the time. You always say, always
But
out.
that's
And
a
I'm like,
logical decision.
But Mum and Dad, if I stayed in every single day
Yeah.
and had no life and, had hairy legs or whatever, I still wouldn't be able to afford
Yeah, it's a logical decision. At the end of the
I
day,
said
yeah.
to my kids the other day, I said, look, I've got a pension plan, shoot me. And that's it. I said, when I've lost my faculties and I'm doing your head in and I'm dribbling, I just fucking put me out of my misery because I'll have had a great time. So that's
that's so important. That is like, honestly, there is literally a logical position. It's like I think I said it on a live stream or something where I was sort of saying, like, if you told me, like, you gave me a book, it was like a French book, and you wanted me to learn French, and you gave me a week to do it, I'm not going to open that book. But if you gave me 5 years and it seemed like reasonable, okay, I'm not going to open it for the first week, but you need to have like realistic ambitions.
Goals,
and like the way to save for a house, I mean, fucking, you save your grand, then your car breaks. Grand gone. So it's like, it's unrealistic. So people are making a logical decision by spending their money. And spending their money is not a bad thing for economies. You want people to spend their money. You want both. You want us to be able to save to buy a house, and you also want us to be able to spend money in the economy.
And afford to have a child.
Yeah.
Which a lot of people can't. And this is the thing, people are so tough on Gen Z, and it was quite interesting the other day because David Mitchell, who's the comic
Peep Show.
Peep Show, exactly.
Legend.
The London Economic wrote, David Mitchell didn't hold back in a recent column after a study revealed that more than half of 13 to 27-year-olds think the UK would be better off with a dictator in charge. And he went on to say, you know, they are so wrong-headed, maybe it's better not to consult them. In a way, they're making a very clever satirical point, except they're obviously effing bleep. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, again, I understand why they're feeling that way. Like you said, completely disenfranchised, and also I think at that age you're a little bit sort of like anti-rules and whatever. But Nicola Thorpe, the commentator, had this to say about that.
So by now you've probably seen this survey that says that 52% of Gen Zers want a dictatorship in the UK, and it's done the rounds on all of the debate shows, all of the newspapers. I feel like I'm going crazy, but in the survey, if you actually read the question, the people answering it were not given a choice between democracy and dictatorship. They were asked, do you think that the UK would be a better place if a strong leader who does not have to bother with Parliament and elections was in charge? Do you expect truly a 13-year-old to know that someone who is a strong leader who doesn't have to bother with Parliament is a dictator? And all of the connotations that word brings up.
But it is 13 to like
27.
So I get up for 13, but 27 you start questioning at that point. Yeah, I know what they're trying to say. I think maybe it's a bit embellished as I have heard people say this as like a survey. Maybe it's a bit embellished, but I think it points to something, and I don't think it should just be glossed over. I do think it's
a worry.
Yeah, I think it's a worry for sure, and I think because they haven't seen a good run of democracy. But I have heard people criticise that study a bit. Do they make money off making these studies? I mean, the amount of publicity that got, I'm kind of like hoping they make money.
We go on the kinds of shows like, Jeremy Vine or whatever, where every single day they need to find debates. Every single day. So they will take whatever hook invites a debate. And that's the way our media, it's so disposable. If you think about all the presenters on any of the big stations like LBC, it's like, what is an interesting hook to get people ringing in? So anyway, Ollie Dugmore from Politics Joe went on to say this.
Rather than seeking to understand why might this younger generation have lost its faith in democracy, and perhaps the reason might be because the organisation of our society is such now that I think we've broken the social contract with the younger generation on the most basic of levels, be that if you work hard you should be able to get on, you should be able to get a job. One wage should be enough to give yourself some secure housing. 2 wages should be enough to be able to afford to go on a nice holiday and buy a £20 bottle of wine at the weekend. That is not an extraordinary ask, right, for a society. But the way that the economy is organised, the way that wage growth has been stagnant, the way that the economy is filled with inflationary pressure, the way that if anybody wants to get on, they do so with £50,000 of debt tied around their necks, and as a result, stay at home, live at home with their mother and father, preventing them from forming really a meaningful romantic relationship with anyone. And they go, do you know what, actually, fuck this. I don't like the way this society is organised.
He smashes it on that. That's bang on the money.
Really interesting. Although who's spending 20 quid on a bottle of wine?
I know, I love Marina. She's like, 20
quid? Yeah.
Not down at the bottom.
No, even when we had Gary Lineker over for dinner, I gave him a Tesco Finest.
He bought, I think, what was probably a bit more of an expensive bottle one. I could see him sort of twitching to open it. But
it's wasted. It's wasted on me, and I'm wasted on it. So, okay, I want to ask this question because you came back from the edge. So what do our politicians need to do right now to speak to the person who is listening to Farage and going, oh, that sounds sensible, listening to Jordan Peterson going, oh, they're speaking to me. What could Keir Starmer or indeed any incoming leader of a political party have to do?
So really he needs to say the problem and he needs to give like a solution to it. And then people can like trust in it. Like maybe you even get people who understand. Maybe it will take 10 years. Maybe it will take some time. But if it seems logical and it seems like it's actually thought out and it seems honest, then I think people can get behind it. But yeah, I just think if you don't do that, you will lose to Farage, like for sure. Like because he's doing a great fucking job. He's smashing it. He's charismatic. He knows how to speak to people. He knows how to bullshit people, and he's doing a good job. So it's like.
Do you think part of it is also a comms problem? We've got a marketing and a comms problem because Labour aren't operating in the landscape they need to operate in. Like we are in a particular period now where everyone is optimising for clicks, for views, and
Farage is big on TikTok.
Yeah, there's a reason we cover on our shows and certain things that are quite triggering. It's because they're bloody interesting and they're entertaining to a degree, and there isn't a reform on the left, and Keir Starmer and his Labour Party are not seeing what they need to be doing to step up and engage with that audience.
Yeah, and it's like they don't. So say like the immigration thing. They're not like. So there's all these claims going around. Rupert Lowe, fucking the most boring man on earth. He knows one word and it's immigration. And like he says that every fucking day. And 90% of the shit he says is just so easily debunked.
Yeah.
But like Labour aren't like, I don't know, produce some fucking content that's like raw. Don't be like, well, you know, we understand and respect that people have different opinions. Just say like, look, he's a fucking idiot. He's saying it wrong. This is what immigration is. This is what it does. This is why we have it. Maybe this number's too high. Maybe we need to think about this. Maybe this is perfect, but this is why. A lot of them are students. A lot of them will go home. A lot, you know, it's like, actually be honest. When you look into immigration data, you start getting a clearer picture of like, oh, okay, a lot of them are students and work visas last 5 years. A good percentage will go back to their country.
And we're really missing the seasonal workers as well. Who came over for 4 months.
I think I've sussed it. We need, basically, Labour need influencers.
Yeah.
They need like a Molly May. You know what I mean? They need like a pool of people who get it and who will be able to speak to the next geners, whatever, in their language.
That's the thing, because these sort of like put all their eggs in one basket on the immigration thing, and half of that like people think that illegal immigration is like this major problem, and it's like they don't understand that like the majority of illegal immigration is, I think it's like 80+%. I might need to be fact checked on that, but it's like 80+% of people who overstay work visas. So they might bang out some massive number. They're like, oh, illegal immigrants, and they all think they're all coming on boats, blah blah. But the majority are just people who have come on a work visa. They've tied their whole lives to this country. They've met someone. They've got a job here. Maybe they have no connections back home anymore, or it's tough or whatever. And then they've gone, oh shit, my work visa's run out. That's going to cost me a few thousand to renew, and I've got to pay for the lawyers. And they're just looking at like, fuck. I'm tied to this job. If I go back, it'll wreck my life. People don't understand that is the majority of illegal immigration, is people overstaying work visas. And it's stuff like that where if you just know about it, then you go, oh, okay, maybe the boats problem is a problem, but maybe it's not, we're being invaded by hordes of young men. And it's like all that stuff. Like, yeah, you just need someone to communicate. And that's what I try and do on my channel, is to talk about it as best as I can. But these people have all the data. Labour Party have all the data. They could do a million times better job than me. And they could pay someone to do it better.
Well, the last politician that inspired young people, it was Jeremy Corbyn. And then I think the disappointment, I remember a few youngsters at my actual work crying on the night of the election. I was at work that night. And they were really devastated, and it was the first time they'd ever felt anything political.
I think it's pathetic that the left got so like they had one good guy and he lost, and they're like, oh, it's so. Fucking Farage has been at this shit for 30 years. He has failed, and he won eventually. We had one guy who said the right thing, and we were all like, oh, this is.
And also, he's still only an MP.
Yeah, exactly.
And this is the thing. There are 5 bellends in that party, and actually, the power of Farage is immense. Like if he, God forbid, decided to give up politics tomorrow, went to go and I don't know, cozy up to Trump or whatever. I don't think they do very well at all.
Yeah.
When Tice was leader, they weren't making as much of a mark. So the left do need to
They should have seen it.
cheer the fuck up and find, I don't know, some interesting voices. We do need a left populist.
We have such a strong opportunity. Like we have everything is actually perfect if the right things happen. Like we really do have, like, materially a situation where people can see the results of austerity. So the idea of like shrinking the state, cutting the state, I think for a lot of people in Britain, that's really not going to cut through that much. If you say, if reform come along, like, we need to shrink the government, you can just be like, is that not what austerity was for 14 years? Did we not just cut $500 billion of planned public spending?
Also, again, how does that help any of us?
Yeah, exactly. And I think, but you need to have the people to say this argument. But it's like, the fact that Jeremy Corbyn did so well against the odds and got more votes than Keir Starmer is a good sign. It just meant that was the beginning. All right, you fucked up. I make YouTube videos, you'll have little waves where you're like, oh, I'm doing well, and then bang, you like pop out a couple better like shit videos. They do really bad for a while, and you're going down, and then you go up, and then you go down, and then you go up. But it's always up. And you should have seen Jeremy Corbyn as like, that was a fucking good sign. We almost did something.
Well, also the amount of people who vote for Labour and Green and Lib Dem, you put all them together, that's a hell of a lot more people who voted Conservative and Reform. If you add it up, there are more progressive people in this country.
It just doesn't feel that way, does it, sometimes?
It doesn't, but here we are.
We're quite lucky that we have, I think, was it 5 years to the next election? Is it 2029? Which will just be after Trump, which, you know...
Yeah, hopefully everyone will see
maybe
how
I'm
catastrophic.
totally wrong, and maybe his ideas are brilliant, and maybe it works, but likely it's not going to massively improve the lives of average people in America. We're going to see that, and in that period of time, we have a good period of time to actually push a new message. That immigration shit's going to get fucking boring. Rupert Lowe can only tweet that out 1 million times a day for so long before people get bored.
Boring
so we
fart.
have an opportunity, but we need to take it, and we need good people of all different backgrounds that speak to all different types of people, any community, to put content out and make their voices heard. I'm optimistic, but we have to do everything. We can't be lazy.
Do you know what? You've made me feel a bit more optimistic.
Yeah.
This conversation has, hopefully, trawlers, this made you feel optimistic. And now, maybe you might even laugh, because we love this. Sometimes we do underrated clips or underrated tweets of the week. And in this episode, yours is the underrated tweet of the week. And it was in response to this clip of Mel Gibson.
They're a good bunch out here. I'm glad Trump's here at the moment. You know, it's like Daddy arrived and he's taking his belt off, you know.
Oh, my God, Jesus Christ.
Jimmy, your stellar tweet in response to that was, why do Conservatives have to force their sexuality onto the entire world?
That's very good indeed. And we've got another tweet here to end with as well. Chris Lang wrote, people getting aerated about reform being ahead in the polls 4.5 years before an election is odd. In the 4.5 years before the last election, we had a pandemic, we left the EU, we lost 3 prime ministers, we saw an insurrection in the USA. A week's a long time in politics. 4.5 years is ...
It's all to play for.
It's all to play for. Marina, we just keep taking our rockers and, you know, we just keep sort of looking after
positive
ourselves.
mental
I'll
attitude.
keep getting my hair done.
Yeah, keep that. Stop saving money.
What money?
It'll all be fine. Jimmy, it's been a complete and utter joy. Please keep doing what you're doing. I hope that some of our listeners will go over to YouTube and find Jimmy's content, specifically from my recommendation, watch his documentary because it's bloody great. And is there anything else you want to plug?
I'm not really, no. I mean, just Jimmy the Giant on YouTube, Jimmy the G, I think, or Jim the Giant on Twitter. And I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing, trying to do more live streams. I want to try and connect a lot of creators.
You do a bit of Instagram as well?
A little bit, yeah. Mainly my wife's like cooking and me eating it. And
That's nice.
It's cute. Yeah. It's cute.
See, you need balance. You need something wholesome in there, don't
you?
Exactly.
So, I want to build the streaming and connect all these left-wing creators. Anyone who's on this message, but like, connect them and try and bring us together as a movement, like the right did.
I was going to say, like the turning point of the left.
Yeah, we need that.
Great.
And
do you know
Joe
what?
Rogan.
Bring us in. I feel like that's a business meeting.
Bring us in. Bring us in if you want a little bit of feminine energy in there.
That's feminised.
We've got the Troll Pod. We do bits and pieces on there, but we're not radicalising, are we, my love? We need to get
it's an echo chamber. Jemma said to me, Marina, she said, Marina, the trawl, we're not going to change any minds on the trawl. We're a comfort blanket. We're a comfort blanket for people.
People need a comfort blanket. That's why they sell.
We know our place. We know our lane.
Exactly.
Nah, you guys do good stuff.
Thank you. Right, we are going to finish with a pudding. We always do this on the trawl, and we like to make it appropriate. So this is absolutely brilliant. It's by the wonderful Politics Joe, and they called it Nigel Farage is running for reform. Reform UK times the Venga Boys.
The reform bus is coming and everybody's running from York to Crewe to Truro. Come on and join our shit show. The refugees we're spurning and human rights we're burning. Don't listen to the experts, the science makes our rent stir. I've got something to tell you. Live on GB News. The woke will eat your children, and Sadiq God approves.
Who's laughing?
Hey now, hear what I say now. No-go zones are just around the corner. Hey now, hear what I say now. And Christmas has been banned in schools.
Nothing.
The reform bus is coming, and everybody's running. From York to Crewe to Truro, come on and join our shit show. The refugees we're spurning, and human rights we're burning. Don't listen to the experts, the science makes our rent stir.
Absolute nut jobs.